Live from Tokyo, Japan, it's the Liquid Coin AMA with Chief Trading Officer Andre Pemmelaar. Hey guys, welcome. I hope you guys can see me. You know what I would really appreciate? I'm stretching the technical envelope here, and I'd like to know that you guys can A, see me, and B, hear me. So can someone confirm to me that is the case? I'm looking for a comment, guys. Great, you can see me? Thank you, guys. Okay, so looks like we're going to take a little bit of time here. I'm going to wait a little bit for some more users to join. I want to break Catherine's record here. I don't know what it is anymore. Maybe Mike's is probably up around 200-300 users live. I'm hoping I can get a little bit higher. In the meantime, let me share with you my screen here. Let me just confirm that I am sharing my screen with you. Okay, guys, so first thing I want to point out before we get going here, while we're waiting for a few people, in case somebody looks back, is that we are hiring. And so this is my shameless plug before the proper AMA begins. We are hiring a large number of people. We're growing very rapidly. Our exchange volume is growing very rapidly. The number of new signups is growing rapidly. Everything is taking off exponentially, and we are looking for new employees. So here's my shameless pitch for you guys. You can work at a very exciting place where we're doing some cutting edge stuff, both on the technology side and on the finance side. So if you're interested, have a look at Coin's hiring page. That is under Coins. If you just go to coin.com and you look at the career section, you will see this page, okay? All right, so the other thing I want to bring up here, just a few things. It's Friday night. I hope some of my colleagues are watching. They're all busy having a party here in Japan. It's the monthly evening out at Coin Japan. And they're doing something similar in Vietnam right now. Apparently, they're eating a ton of ribs. I'm a little bit jealous there. This is the rib eating contest before it began. This is during the frenzy over here. And this looks like the aftermath. I think somebody went to throw up. Who knows? All right. Well, so let's see where we are in terms of users. We don't really have that many yet. So you know what? I'm going to take a few questions up front. I'm going to wait for a few more to join. Let's start with Justin Perez. You have a thought here. What is your thought on government crackdowns on cryptocurrencies? Okay, so here's my opinion on this. First of all, it's inevitable that more and more crypto will become regulated. So there are going to be holdout jurisdictions that will be less regulated. They'll be more like Japan that have taken a stance that's very pro-regulation. But I think all of the major countries in the world, in one way or another, will move towards some form of regulation, and it's inevitable. That said, I think that you're going to see attempts by some countries to literally, as you point out, crack down on cryptos. So we've seen some very harsh policies. In China. Japan has taken a much more pro-regulatory approach, and I think we're going to see more and more of the pro-regulatory, because I'm not sure that the crackdowns itself will work. But in the short time, more crackdowns than less is, I think that is likely. Okay, hopefully that answers your question. Just give me a sec here. Okay. Yeah, I apologize. I'm still getting new with this OBS software here. I'm not exactly smooth, but I'll work it out. Okay, so here's from Ryan. I'm going to take a question from Ryan just up front. He's asked about whether the Cash blockchain will offer POS or POW or both. Let's talk about, for those of you who don't know what he's talking about cryptocurrency consensus algorithms. In this case, my personal opinion on this, is For cash, we're almost certainly looking at a proof of stake model, but there is some room to adjust that. We're looking at a number of different approaches to distributed ledger technology. And in fact, when we talk about cash and the cash blockchain internally, we don't even really refer to it as blockchain technology so much as a distributed ledger technology. So we're very impressed with some of the DAG-based approaches. That's the directed acyclic graph approaches. And I'm personally a fan of Hashgraph and of what IOTA and others are doing. Well, IOTA's a bit different, but so we're not entirely certain how the final consensus algorithm will look, but I can tell you for sure it will not be proof of work, and much more likely it will be proof of stake. Okay, so Michael Jones, will Koreans have access to Liquid? Possibly. There is a regulatory framework being put in place right now. We don't yet know how that regulatory framework will work. I can guarantee you that Coin will always go white hat, white web, pro-regulatory. So we need to make sure that we have the proper regulatory framework in place to accept Koreans, but provided that the Korean government puts forth some form of clear regulatory regime, Koreans will be able to sign up for Liquid. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Okay, Alvin, I'm going to postpone your question because I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in detail. Alvin has asked here, what's the basic mechanism for Liquid? Is cash roll a settlement coin? Yes to that, but I want to delay on that a little bit because I have some slides that I'm going to talk about, okay? Okay, so Ravit here has asked, hi Andre, I understand the utility behind the cash token. However, I do not fully understand the decentralized aspect of cash or the Liquid platform. Can you please help me to clarify this? Okay, so let's start at the beginning here. So initially, the Liquid platform will not be a decentralized exchange. Okay, so the Liquid platform is built partially on top of the existing technology used by Coinex and by cryptos. It's enabling that in a number of different ways. That is not decentralized. That said, we are very seriously looking at how cash can be utilized for a decentralized exchange. And that is under research. There's an entire team within Coin, in the next room right beside where I work, looking at that. Now, primary to that, there's a number of issues when you do this on the blockchain. Sometimes people are not aware of some of these issues, but it's not just about settlement, right? If you're going to do a decentralized exchange, there's a big and very important piece around latency. So if you have 1 or 2 transactions a second, that's just not going to cut it. You need a lot more transactions, and we have to address that, and we're looking at ways to do so. Okay. That said, will cash be used as a form of settlement? Yes, almost certainly. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we're doing in the various phases as we go forward. Okay. All right. So Sora. Okay. So Sora is asking here, does the World Order Book provide best bid and ask prices of different exchanges? How does it show it on the order book? If there is a lower bid price on exchange or higher ask price on exchange fee, if a trader trades in the World Book, what is the price that he is allowed to be filled at? Okay, so let's talk about how it works under the hood. Okay, I'm going to get into a little bit of the technical detail here, and hopefully you guys can understand how it works. So the way to think of this is there are essentially almost 2 types of order books. There's what we call the internal world order book. Now, what the internal world order book is doing is it's looking across all of the markets that are native to Liquid. So these are not external, these are not on other exchanges. And it's looking to see if there is a match available. It's also on the back end using our multi-market orders. It is it's looking to see based on FX rates or cryptocurrency rates whether a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 hop match is possible. And if it is, it will try to make that possible. If it's not, what it will do is it will figure out if for a given, let's use an example to make it clear. Let's say that you are a BTC SGD trader. So you are trading, you're buying and selling Bitcoin, and you are looking to buy and sell using the Singapore dollar. So what's going to happen under the hood is it's going to look at all the other BTC markets. It'll see using FX rates whether on an FX rate adjusted basis an order can be matched, and if it can be matched, it will affect that match. And then under the hood, it will do the FX transaction necessary to complete the final leg of that transaction. But as if you've read the Liquid paper, you will know that's not the only thing it can do. It can also do 2, 3, and so on hops to make this possible. So at the same time, it's also going to be looking at, for example, whether an ETH market is tradable against BTC. So that's a case of a two-step transaction where it'll be taking prices from the ETH market. Let's say it's an ETH JPY market, so it's going to do an FX transaction, or it'll do an FX calculation to price that into SGD. And at the same time, it will price the base, which is ETH in this case, into BTC. And what you will see in the internal workbook is that will be reflected in the SGD workbook. Okay, so it can happen, for example, that you'll have traders on both sides. Imagine a case where everybody is a limit order and nobody is filled. And all that happens is that the ETH BTC rate changes. So in those cases, suddenly a large number of people could be instantly filled, because what's effectively happening is that the ETH BTC rate is allowing ETH markets to trade against BTC markets. Okay, and that's all happening under the hood, and that is all part of the internal order book. Okay, so that's all happening within our own matching engine and using our own, what we call our rates manager and a cross-currency conversion engine. Now, getting back to external, right? So what happens on the external is this. We have a piece of technology, actually a few pieces of technology, but let's sum it up and just call it the SOR. It's a little bit more than the SOR, but we'll call it that. So SOR, for those of you who do not know, means smart order routing. And what the SOR is doing is it is using the same cross-currency conversion calculations to figure out if on a given external exchange, we can affect a match between what is on our internal order book and what is on an external order book. Okay. Now, a very important point to note here, I'm going to talk about this in the slides I have, but this is kind of paramount to get your head around the whole thing. A lot of people ask us about our partnerships with other exchanges. So let me make this clear. There are two things that need to line up to make those matches happen. One of those is the prices, of course, need to be available to make the match. And when I say the prices, let me just delve in a little bit into detail about that, how we do that. We're going to look at an external order book. So let's break it back down to a very simple example here where we were talking about BTC SGD. So let's assume that there is a BTC Euro market out there. So we're going to look at the Euro to SGD FX rate, and we will reprice what is available externally in the BTC Euro market into what is into SGD. And if a match between those two can be made, what will happen is that Coin will act as the counterparty on both sides of that trade. So this is something I'd like a lot of people to understand. Get a lot of questions about this, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more if people want to understand a little bit more about what we mean by ECNs and DMA and all that kind of stuff. But what I want you to understand here is that what is effectively happening under the hood is that Coin is trading on an external exchange on behalf of the client. They are affecting a match against a client on some external exchange, and they are affecting the same match on our exchange. And we are passing on those two. We're matching them up. So if in the case of the BTC SGD trader, if they were selling BTC, what would happen is that we would be buying on this external exchange with Euro. So we would receive these Bitcoin. Of course, we wouldn't immediately receive them from the exchange. But we would affect that match, and we would be delivering those BTC to the person selling. We would receive from the person selling SGD, and we would then take that SGD, possibly in real time. There are cases where we might not do it in real time, and turn that into euros, right? So that's essentially how that all works. Now, what I would like everyone to understand is, I mentioned there were 2 points to this. One was the price matchup. So the price is, of course, FX adjusted, and it's also fee adjusted. So let me understand what I mean by fee adjusted here. Of course, on the external exchanges, we have to pay fees. Now, because we are trading extensively, and because in the future with the external world book, we'll be trading even more, we enjoy extremely low FX transaction rates or transaction rates, fees. And to give you an example, on any of the major crypto exchanges that we trade on, and we trade on almost all of them that you would know of, certainly all of the major ones, we currently receive best transaction fees for those exchanges, or in some cases better. Okay, so you cannot get necessarily as an individual the exchange costs that we are getting. The second thing that we do there to make that match is we do an impact adjustment, because we do have to protect ourselves and we do have to worry about the transaction risk. So in a highly volatile market, there may be a price that matches your price, but if the markets are moving extremely swiftly, we may adjust those prices for volatility. Okay, so that's all about how we would make the match on the pricing side. But I mentioned there's a second very, very important point, and that is our external capital capacity at a given exchange. And a very big portion of what we're doing this year has to do with enhancing that. So I'm going to, as I mentioned, I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So what does that mean? Well, let's say that on a given exchange that we put, $30 million on that exchange. Well, if we have no credit facilities or anything, then we have purchasing power up to $30 million of fiat. And conversely, we would have something similar if we had Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever we may have on that exchange. So in its most simplest form, we're going to be limited by price availability and by our own available capital. So to answer your question, go back more significantly, will you get the best prices? Yes, if two criteria line up. One, the best prices are on an impact and fee adjusted basis and FX adjusted basis available. And two, if we have the capital to affect the trade. Okay? All right. So I hope that was a long answer. I hope that was a thorough answer. That was for Sora. At this, you know what I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch over and talk to you a little bit about that piece, since we've gotten onto that piece already. Just give me a moment here. Hopefully I get this right. So, new technology here. So what I want to share with you is the stages of our liquidity partnerships. Just a moment. Okay, evidently I don't know what I'm doing with this, but good enough. Okay, good enough. There we go. My apologies here. I need to study a little bit more about OBS. Hey, I'm new to it, but I did want to take you through this. So what you see here are the stages of an exchange partnership. And we get a lot of questions about this. So here's a typical question we'll get. How many people, how many exchanges have signed up for Liquid? And, you know, we get all sorts of variants of that question. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to take you through the stages of what we mean by exchange partnerships and what that does for Liquid, and kind of give you a sense of where we are on that. So I'm going to talk about them. First of all, the very first stage that we could call, I don't know if we might going to call it a partnership, but let's call it trading enabled. Okay, so this is this stage where Coin has set up an account and is able to trade on that exchange, is able to do all the normal things that you would expect: transfer money in, receive money out. I want to stress, by the way, receive fiat back, because sometimes with a given exchange, they may have decent liquidity, but they may have issues around the movement of fiat. So with that said, if you are just trading enabled, of which we have now, I think we're trading enabled for 17 exchanges. What does that give us for the Liquid platform? So that gives us the ability to execute on any of these with the World Book SOR. But as I mentioned before, you are limited to one-to-one capital usage, right? And what's the big downside of this? Well, of course, one of them is that we're limited to this one-to-one capital usage. And although we raised an extensive amount of money in our ICO, that is still not enough to meet the demand, right? So we're definitely working on this. The other thing about this is that particularly recently, the counterparty risk is very high in these, and we take this very, very seriously. So we've done an ICO, we've raised some significant capital, we have a decent balance sheet. We view this, it's very, very important to us to understand the counterparty risk with each of these exchanges that we're dealing with. And so when we're just trading enabled, we have an issue around counterparty risk. We cannot have too much of our capital on any one exchange. So as you know, well, maybe you don't know, the largest blockchain hack, crypto hack, happened a little while back, a little over a month ago on CoinCheck, $550 million in NEM. And if you would have looked up CoinCheck up until that point, they looked like a pretty well-run organization. Under the hood, it turned out they had a number of issues around hot wallets. So I'm not going to go into that. But what I want to say is that counterparty risk is we can assess it to a certain extent beforehand, but there are unknowns, and you cannot completely mitigate it when you're doing this one-to-one trading enabled, right? So, but I will stress that we are trading enabled for a large number of exchanges, and that does allow us to execute on our vision with the Liquid external order book, okay? But now we move on to the second level with exchange partnerships here. So this is where we go to the exchanges and we ask them for credit, right? And this is a very common process that most exchanges, including our own, are set up to do with institutional clients. So we will go to them, they will assess us, and we will receive some form of credit. So we already receive credit from a number of exchanges. A few of the major exchanges, I'm not going to name them, but I will tell you that, the most major exchanges here in Asia and in the US offer us credit facilities. I should mention one in Europe. But these are essentially a way to leverage our capital a small amount, okay? So what this does when we're at this stage is it gives us greater external capacity for the World Book. We're able to do more matching. But we are limited to the standard credit terms of exchanges. And I have to say, if we are competing or you're comparing us to anybody else out there, I would say that almost everybody else out there is just at stage one, and we are, or in some cases, at this sort of stage two in their partnerships, okay? But what is exciting about what we're doing, people, when they were deciding whether to invest in cash, a lot of people made the assessment that we've got a management team that has a lot of experience in finance. And this is where that matters. So some of my colleagues, Ray, Mario, Seth, particularly Seth in this area, has an amazing background. He, as some of you know, he's head of our operations and has a lot of experience with cash operations and with settlement at Goldman Sachs. So what we're doing right now is we're moving towards what we call a T+1 settlement, okay? So we've already in discussions with some exchanges, and we're already setting up the financial infrastructure. And I want to really emphasize that this is where the Liquid team differentiates itself. There is serious deep-level knowledge, both on the technical side and on the financial infrastructure side, to make this happen. It is not easy. And we are executing on this. So I'm blown away. I'm so proud that we're doing this. I had an amazing meeting. I don't want to name the guy. A very interesting meeting. Frank, I'm just going to call him Frank. But he has a very interesting proposal around this. We're also working with a number of banks in this way to execute on T+1 settlement. So for those of you who are not involved in finance, you're like, what is T+1 settlement? What does this mean? Well, what it means is essentially Coin places its assets into a bank that is shared by these other exchanges. And there are a number of banks that are vying for our business and for other large exchanges business. And what they offer in T+1 settlement is essentially you provide our exchange or some other third party some form of margining. And you base that margining on a certain amount of collateral that is locked up. And what happens is at the end of every cycle, usually once every 24 hours, all of the trades that have executed settle. There's a movement of fiat, possibly of crypto, back and forth to settle. So either we have a debit or a credit in any of these given areas. And what this allows us to do is to leverage the amount of trading that we can do on any external exchange without increasing the counterparty risk. That's what I want to stress there. So we have a small amount of counterparty risk. We never completely eliminate it, but it greatly reduces it. And as we move forward with these T+1 settlement processes, this is going to really ramp up what we can do. So to give you an example, let's say that we were talking about a major exchange based in Hong Kong. I'm not going to name any names here, okay? But these guys have very good liquidity. I personally think they have a very solid API. Some people have concerns about the counterparty risk with them. So what really happens here is that until the trades settle T+1, we don't actually exchange much. We just have this third party ensure that the funds are available for us to settle at T+1. Okay. So now I want to talk about this last stage here, prime brokerage and custodial. So this is a bigger piece here, and this is the final piece in the puzzle. There's a little bit of difference here. With custodial and prime brokerage, what you really end up with is, it's certainly what our solution is probably going to look like, is we have a third-party entity that is going to provide custodial services. So in our case, we're looking at a trust bank. We've talked previously, I think Mike mentioned in a previous AMA, about Mitsubishi UFJ as a potential candidate for this. There may be other possibilities as well. What happens with custodial is, we'll probably use a three-party multi-sig wallet for the crypto piece of that, and the existing financial infrastructure for the fiat piece of that. So institutional clients will send their crypto to this multi-sig wallet that is managed in a three-party way with our custodial agent. And in the case of fiat, they will deposit fiat into this trust bank. So when they deposit fiat into the trust bank, what really happens is they end up with, on the blockchain, some form of tokenized fiat. And with that tokenized fiat, that allows them, with our partner exchanges, to move around fiat in a form of settlement that is in the end effectively backed by some sort of one-to-one fiat at the custodial agent. And I'm not going to go into all the details. In fact, I hope that Seth will do an AMA. He's much more competent and he's probably much more articulate and better able to explain all the procedures behind this. But from the point of view of liquid clients, what difference does that make? Well, first of all, it makes it very attractive to traditional finance. So if you talk to some of the hedge funds, or if we talk to some of the big banks, we're currently in discussions with an extremely large investment bank, one of the largest investment banks, who has shortlisted us as one of the potential exchanges that they can work with. But they need a few pieces in place. And custodial and potentially prime brokerage is something that makes it extremely attractive to them. So if we can get these final pieces in place, I think we're going to be the number one venue for traditional finance as they enter the crypto world. Okay, so that's a lot there. Let me stop there for a moment and go back and see if we've got any other questions, because I got a feeling we got a whole bunch. Okay, so I'm going to talk a moment about the timeline here, but let me see if there are any questions of what I just talked about before I go into I'm going to take Michael Jones's question here, which is, would it be possible to deploy a liquid exchange in a region such as China to access that market and to attach it to an external main exchange? I'm going to say, Michael, at the moment, that's going to be difficult. And the reason for that is, as I mentioned before, we are very pro-regulation. And if China is not willing to accept crypto exchanges on their soil, we are certainly not going to go against the laws of China, right? So we probably wouldn't be approaching that at this moment, right? Now, certainly, if China eases up in their regulatory regime, we might consider something like that. Okay, so let's take wrongs here with external matching engine on CoinEx. Just a moment here. Okay, with the external matching engine, guys, I apologize, by the way. I'm not really yet very good at OBS. I'd switch back. With the external matching engine, CoinEx doesn't need to seek approval from other exchanges to gain access to their liquidity pools. So yes, wrong. That is the case. We don't need to have approval from them. But as I mentioned in my previous presentation, we will certainly be pursuing approval and pursuing credit agreements and pursuing T+1, because that's going to give us a huge liquidity boost. Okay. So Kushwaha, Cryptos Exchange USD coin list. Not sure if that's a question. I'm sorry about the video quality. Mike Miesel just joined. Hi, Mike. Big call out to you. Okay, guys. So I don't see any other questions right now. So give me just a moment here. As I say, I'm not really yet great with this. Just make sure that I do have desktop. Okay, good. I really need to understand how OBS works, and I do apologize for that. Okay, great. We do seem to have this. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the timeline. We kind of skipped over that, and I do want people to have a sense of what's coming up. And I hope you're excited by it. So first of all, let me take a step back and tell you a little bit about what has happened. So the last time I did an AMA was I think it was in just before our ICO, so it's been about 5 months, 5.5 months. Since then, we've spent a lot of time developing the underlying technology for the multi-market orders and for the internal world order book. Also, a number of enhancements around the SOR. So let's talk about timelines, okay? So the first thing I want you to note is April 6th. Coming to a cryptocurrency exchange near you, actually just coming to one. What are we doing here? This is the World Book Beta. So I am so excited about this. Our development team has been working, at times literally day and night, to ensure that this gets launched. And last week, on Thursday, we launched, that's not yesterday, but a little over a week ago, we launched, the proof of concept live version of this. So currently our multi-market orders, this is the underlying technology that powers the World Book, at least the internal World Book, was enabled and is currently running on cryptos. We don't talk about where it's running. It's running in a very small corner of cryptos intentionally because we just want some natural volume, and we're kind of testing it, field testing it right now. I will say that it has had basically no issues. What has surfaced is the matching engine itself turns out to be so performant that it's causing issues with some of the services around the matching engine, and we're addressing those. So I think we did this in a very responsible way, and I'm very happy about the way we did it. We rolled it out in a very small way off in the corner there, and this has allowed us to surface all of these issues so that when we move on April 6th, hopefully we will have a very smooth launch. So what's going to happen on April 6th? Let's talk about that a little bit. The MMOs will be enabled. Now, what are we going to enable them? Notice I don't say that this is the liquid launch. Let me make myself very clear. This is not liquid launch. This is World Book beta launch. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that MMOs, or let's call it the internal world order book piece, not the external, but the internal world order book piece, will be enabled for BTC, ETH, BCH, and Cash. And all of those are base currencies, right? So if you're thinking about pairs, that's the part that's on your left, will be tradable against fiat and against any of those other pairs. Okay, so this is kind of exciting for us and kind of really interesting. To give you an example, we don't have a BTC, BCH market on CoinEx. We don't have one. But when we enable the MMOs, we will instantly, effectively have one. And I think I've already outlined previously how that all works. Also, all of these base currency, BTH, ETH, BCH, Cash, they'll all be tradable against fiat. And so we're really excited about this. What we think is going to happen, what we believe is going to happen, and I feel fairly confident about, is particularly in BTC, you're going to see a huge ramp up. So if you're a BTC JPY trader on CoinEx, you're going to see some additional liquidity. If you are anything else against BTC, you are going to see a huge liquidity improvement. So we have a lot of Singaporean traders. Big call out to you guys. We love you. We have a lot of Indonesian traders. Actually, I think some of the Indonesian traders, they're looking for tighter spreads, tighter liquidity. This is what you're going to get in this. Okay, so suddenly all of that liquidity, and this is what we talked about in the white paper, we're really delivering on this, is we talked about desiloing all of this liquidity, and that's what's happening on April 6th. So all of this liquidity that is available in BTC will suddenly be available in all of these other BTC markets, but also they will be enabled and be cross-matching against things like ETH, okay? So I think that what you're going to see is a big ramp up in liquidity. And if you are, as I mentioned, if you are a current CoinEx trader, then you should see a big increase. Particularly if you're not already a BTC JPY trader, but you say Singaporean or whatever it may be, or some of the more less traded like Filipino pesos or things like this, you're going to suddenly see all of that liquidity. And I think for a lot of people, first of all, technically this is the first, but for a lot of people, this is going to be very interesting. And going forward, this is the vision that we talked about, and I'm just so proud that we're delivering. But think about this, right? So we're currently talking about these secondary markets, such as, the Canadian dollar is one that we're looking at. And there are others, by the way, that we're looking at, right? Well, what's it take now to offer a highly liquid BTC or ETH or BCH market in any of these secondary fiat pairs? I tell you, it takes just the FX exchange enablement, which is actually a fairly easy piece for us, and setting up the market. So our ability to scale going forward, I think, is going to be very attractive. And I also think we're in all of these other markets, such as BCH, ETH, they're going to benefit from the BTC liquidity that's coming through from them. And we hope that this will create a kind of positive feedback that will just generally enhance liquidity going forward. Okay, so that's what you're getting on April 6th. The official liquid launch of World Book. When does that happen? We are aiming for the end of May. So what does that mean? How does that differ from what I just talked about? So what I talked about right now is enabling the World Book internal on CoinEx effectively. What you get on at the end of May is the official liquid launch of the full World Book. Now that is the external World Book only. Okay, that's the desktop experience only. We don't have the mobile yet for that. How's that going to look? Well, what's going to happen is that both CoinEx and cryptos will cease to exist, and all of our existing customers will be aggregated into one new platform, which will be the Liquid platform, and all new signups will be signing up for the Liquid. And actually, we've gotten the liquid.com URL, and that we'll be starting. I think we've got a great basis for that. We're very excited about that. We're also doing a lot of work on the desktop experience. So, we don't talk about the desktop experience. We don't really talk about our UX or UI or anything. It's not really something we thought to differentiate ourselves on. But, part of the point of everything we're doing here is to build the on-ramps for mainstream to enter the crypto world. And part and parcel of that is delivering them a really high quality desktop experience. So we're putting some significant resources as well into that. And you should see some dramatic improvements going forward. So not just at the end of May. At the end of May, it's going to be a significant upgrade. But even going forward 3-4 months after that, you're probably going to see some major enhancements to the desktop experience, right? Now, the other thing, I don't think I put it in here, but I want to stress that gets executed there, is, of course, the external world order book piece, okay? So we won't be able to, we're not going to have the T+1 or all of that stuff I just talked about earlier, but we will have the external world book piece. And that should further increase liquidity, particularly in all of these secondary token markets. So let's stop there just for a moment. Also, I want to talk about cryptos and the growth of token markets here, and what's that and how that matters for Liquid as well. So many of you may not be aware of this, but Cryptos is currently listing 3 to 4 new tokens a week. So our ICO token listing service has taken off in a really big way. It's become a major business for us. And I can even envision a point going forward where, in the same way that you almost have the New York Stock Exchange, you could have something similar for the token world that would be part of the Liquid platform. And we're investing a lot of resources, not just into the token listings, but into the whole ICO token process from beginning to end. And that means the whole ICO process itself. And I think I'm going to leave Seth to talk about that, because he's the guy behind that, the genius behind that. But what that has done for us is it's making a lot of opportunities available. So to give you an example, it is possible that a given token will be trading in both ETH and BTC, and that those won't perfectly line up, and that you will be able, in an implied way, to get a better ETH BTC trade by going through these tokens. And so that has a really beneficial effect on both sides. On one side, you've got, within the internal world order book, you've got a better source of rates for ETH BTC. On the other side, you've got people in the token versus ETH and BTC that are being instantly matched. So there's a whole beneficial circle, and we just think this is just going to take off, right? So that's what you should expect at the end of May. Okay. Now we move forward a little bit. Talk about June, July. It's a little bit vague there. Because we still have to spec out a lot of it, but I'm going to call it around that period. We should be launching the Liquid mobile experience. So we've already begun that process, and we're working it out. For those of you who use the CoinX app, it's not even designed by the same company. It's a whole new approach to it. I think you're going to find it very attractive. I've seen a lot of the mock-ups. In fact, I wanted to show some of them, but I thought I would basically really piss off our designers, and chose not to do that. The other thing that we're rolling out here, and I put in their tentative deadline, we're still working out this, is our Fix API. So Fix API, this is an immensely important piece of technology. Now, if you know anything about finance, you'll know that Fix APIs are kind of a commodity. They're a piece of technology that's been around for a while. But in the crypto world, they are still very rare. And when we talk about liquidity, of course, we talk about the World Book and all that kind of stuff, and everybody's excited about that. But this old commoditized technology, Fix, turns out to be a very big piece in increasing our liquidity. Now, why? And that is because all of these traditional finance players who are interested in coming in, and all of these third-party liquidity providers, they all want to come to us with Fixed API. So I'll give you an example of a group I just talked to. There's a group out of Hong Kong. They have a fairly big metals trading business. So they're a retail group that offers markets for various metals, so gold against USD, Euro, etc., Hong Kong dollar, and they're offering their clients crypto, right? But of course, they want a Fix API. So by enabling a Fix API, what suddenly happens is all of this liquidity, this retail liquidity, suddenly becomes matchable against the World Book. So everybody kind of has this image of us going out to existing exchanges. But I want you to understand and be really excited by this Fix API, because what's happening is we're now just giving ourselves a kind of a gateway for all these people who want to enter the crypto world to immediately sign up with us and just get enabled. So Fix is a standard protocol. It's a fairly simple piece. Once it's done it's going to really enable this. And what I think is going to happen is a lot of retail groups that we've been approached by. I think I can't count them on two hands, literally. I'm pretty sure we're above 10, and we're probably above 15 different separate groups who are in some way a retail group who would like to offer crypto. And so what we're offering there through this Fix API is suddenly they have the ability to completely offer all of our pairs to them, and vice versa. That liquidity pool will become available for us. So, we don't talk about it much in the paper. We do mention the Fix API, but it's a really critical component. Okay, so let's move on. Q3 of 2018. Full financial and technical infrastructure T+1. So as I mentioned, we are laying the groundwork in terms of financial infrastructure. That means setting up bank accounts. We're just in the process of finalizing some of these. We had some great meetings in the last few weeks with some people who are providing these T+1 settlement procedures and the entire infrastructure there. And what we're looking through it for is by the end of Q3 to have almost all of this enabled. So if we have all of these pieces in place, what that allows us to do is to go to all of our liquidity partners, our third-party exchanges. So one that we've already announced a partnership with is Bitphoenix. As an example, they are currently working with this same bank. So that's an example of somebody where we can work with them. We can mitigate the counterparty risk. They may want to mitigate the counterparty risk against us. But once we have that in place, we go to a T+1 settlement. Suddenly, we have the ability to take our existing balance sheet and ramp it up and add a tremendous amount of liquidity there, right? Finally, Q1 2019, we're aiming at the prime brokerage and custodial. I'm not going to talk too much about that. Still a lot to be put in place there, okay? So hopefully that gives everybody a pretty good idea of what we're doing here. Let me go back and take some questions. Switch back here. Okay, I hope not seeing too many questions right now. So let me answer some questions that I typically get from people. Let's talk about how volume works. I'm not sure why, but a lot of people want to hear about this. So, and how it works in terms of who you're executing against, right? So, of course, when you're executing on the internal world order book, coin is on both sides of those trades. Okay, so we are the counterparty on each side. And the same case is true when we're doing this against the external world order book. Okay, so I know that was one question that's come up quite a few times. Another thing I want to talk about is how we handle regulatory, since that is another question that has typically been asked by a number of people. So how are you going to do all of this? You've got guys on cryptos who were enabled purely for crypto trading. You've got a very pro-crypto regulatory regime here in Japan, but it is a restricted number of pairs. How do you handle all of that? Because a lot of people are concerned that we're not going to be able to deliver on what we're saying. We have a framework in place, and I want to just take a little bit of time to explain how that works. So we work with something called currency entitlements, and the way that works is this. So if you are, say, let's take the case of fairly restrictive in some ways. So as I mentioned, Japan is very pro-crypto, but they limit the number of crypto pairs that one can trade. So for example, they're very concerned about dark web coins such as Dash. So Dash is, it's not legal for Japanese residents to trade in Dash, right? So how do we handle this on our side? Well, we have this type of form of currency entitlements. And the way we do that is for a given user, if a user is, first of all, it depends on whether a user has been fiat enabled or not. So for a user can sign up, but if they do not provide a bank account, then obviously we cannot fiat enable them, right? So if they are or are not fiat enabled is one part of the piece. And another part of the piece is what region are they currently in? So are they in Japan or wherever it may be, right? Singapore, etc. And based on those two things, we arrive at the subset of cryptocurrencies that a given user can access. So a Japanese user would be able to trade all the cryptocurrencies that are currently available on CoinEx. And if they were enabled for fiat, which they almost certainly would be, they would be able to trade all of those against fiat. Okay. Now, if you're signing up in an area that has no cryptocurrency restrictions, you'd be fully enabled for the full set, and that would allow you to trade on any other exchanges. Okay. All right. So so that's one question I get quite a bit. Let me see if there are any others that typically people ask. Okay, so let's go again. Oh yes, an excellent question. Alex DB, when will it be available, the option to automate cash purchase to pay fees? So this is a very important point. Let's talk about cash and the usage of cash. So as we mentioned in the white paper, we want cash, we want you to be able to use cash all across the platform. So the first very important place, of course, if you are an ICO token issuer, you can currently pay for a portion of your fees using cash, and that is already happening. So if you're wondering where the demand for cash is coming from, some of it is coming from ICO issuers, as I mentioned, 3 to 4 a week, and they must pay a portion of their listing fees in cash. Now, when the Liquid Unified Platform launches, that's in May, the end of May, that will include an option to automate cash purchases to pay for your fees. Okay? And that will automatically be enabled. Now, we're also in the process of working through the details of how we're going to provide discounts for cash. So it's already been stated that people are paying their fees in cash. We'll have a 5% discount, but we're looking at other options there to enhance the usage of cash. So there's a whole bunch of areas that we're looking at where what we want to do is be able to say that if you are a long-term holder of cash, that you enjoy some additional benefits. And we're looking at some of the lending rates for the lending platform, or some other ideas around reduced commissions. And that's kind of where we're going with cash. Okay, so that's the answer to your question there. Okay, Stanley, as a token issuer, apart from the discount incentive, will cash be just another currency on Liquid, or will it have preferential properties, right? So potentially it will have preferential properties. Of course, cash can be used as a form of quote currency to buy any of the other currencies. So one of the great usages of cash is, to give you an example, let's say that you're interested in participating in ICOs. You don't need to go through any other form of fiat or any other thing. You can just use cash against any of the cryptocurrencies that are currently being traded on CoinEx or will be traded on Liquid, okay? And as I mentioned, going forward with the cash DLT, we're looking to do a lot of very innovative things around that. Certainly one of the things that we're looking at is very seriously is some form of tokenized fiat based on the cash blockchain. And so there'll be additional benefits for doing that, allowing you to move your fiat back and forth, and particularly when we get the custodial and the prime brokerage pieces up, okay? Okay, so here's a question from Andre. How do you convert different currency types of orders? Can you say which forex exchanges will you, and how will you transfer funds and settle accounts in different currencies? I assume, since you've mentioned forex, you're speaking specifically about FX trading. So currently, we use a very well-known FX provider for our FX exchange, but we are in discussions with an extremely large investment bank to use their forex. Once we have their forex exchange piece in place, we're probably almost exclusively going to be executing through them. And that looks like it's going to happen in Q2. How will we settle in different currencies? Well, provided we're using them, we're going to be using a spot trade with them. And of course, if you're asking me how would we settle accounts in different currencies, the way the cross-currency conversion engine works is, of course, we should, because we're trading at one-to-one in that case, that we should have the spot funds available here, okay? So I'm probably not answering your question as properly as I could, but I think I need Seth to jump in on that one. I'm working under a forex broker and using MetaTrader platform. They are expert platform, there are expert advisors. Will be there on Liquid in the future? Possibly. This is something we've looked at. So I'm not an expert in MetaTrader, but I think what Expert Advisor does is that third parties can offer their trading services or their advisory services. That's something that we've looked at, and we may look at going forward. And there's certainly, I think we mentioned it in the Liquid paper, but this ability for third parties to provide some sort of trading advice, or to maybe to trade on behalf or with some sort of third party, are all possibilities. Will Liquid.com have a referral program? Yes, it will. And I believe we already have a referral program, but hopefully Catherine can answer that in much more detail going forward. Is it going to be like the Binance coin? I would say that is Binance going to be like the cash token? Because I have to say that I feel like the Binance guys are probably watching this video taking notes. I kid you not that it seems like most of the time, a lot of the great ideas we put out there, they imitate. So maybe that's not fair. Maybe I'm going too far. But is it going to be like the Binance coin is the question? I would say, well, yes, the Binance coin is very similar to the cash. Okay. So what will Coin do with the cash fees they receive as fees paid to them? Yes. So Mike spoke about this extensively during the ICO process. It's very important for us to roll back in the fees that we receive and the cash that we receive to grow the ecosystem around cash. So we want to incentivize all of these players that are potential partner for us to work with us. And part of that involves using the cash token to incentivize them, right? So that's a very big portion of what we're going to do with these fees. We hope to grow that, okay? Now that said, there are times where we may enter the market. So if you're using cash to buy and we're receiving cash for fees, at times we may end up with a very large part of cash and too big a float, and at points like that, we may go into the market and sell a little bit of cash. But certainly it would not be in our best interest to dump our own cash in the market. So I want to stress that don't get worried, we're going to be dumping cash. That won't be the case, but if we do start to get large amounts of cash, we may sell a little bit of it out there in a way that will not seriously impact the markets, okay? All right. We are at 1 hour. And I'm wondering if anyone else has any questions. Okay, well, I'm going to give it just a little bit more time. Oh, here we go. Yes, so here's from Shani Shan. Given that the JFSA's recent warning of Binance and their management's rather curt response about moving to Malta, does it look as if Binance will not be able to become part of the World Book? First of all, thank you, Shani Shah. This is a great question. And you know what? I'm going to address this. I'm going to once again show my lack of understanding here and move over to my... because I want to share my screen here a little bit with the last thing to answer this question. Okay, so I thought this might come up. What are some of the biggest struggles that we've had, right? And this relates to Shani Shan's question about Binance, right? So I've been with Coin now for almost exactly a year. I've come to understand a lot about the crypto markets and about our fellow liquidity providers, fellow exchanges. And one of the biggest issues we've found in doing this is counterparty risk. And so Binance is just the poster child for this for us. In some ways, Binance for us as a liquidity partner for the World Book is a marvelous partner. They offer a wealth of tokens, many of which we offer ourselves. So the ability to trade on there as exchanges as well. It's a very good piece with that. But on the other hand, there are all sorts of issues around Binance. So don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing them or coming too down hard on them. I have admiration for everybody in this business who gets into this business and is able to achieve what they did. Okay, so but I will say that unlike our stance, Binance is a little bit more, not a little bit, but a lot more standoffish, and definitely far less pro-regulatory. And for us, when we're looking at whether we can use them for a world book, this is a major issue for us. How do we deal with them? To answer your question very honestly, we're not sure. I don't know if we're going to be able to use Binance. And in fact, it's looking less likely. I want to get that out there. We would love to be able to, but there are so many issues around the regulatory risks with that. Also, we may not feel 100% certain about their security procedures. So, we evaluate all of the exchanges on this, in this aspect, and we've gained some expertise, and we are concerned about that. Okay, so will we be able to work with them? Let me just say TBD, right? To be decided. But what are some of the biggest struggles we've had with Liquid? That is it. Right? How do we deal with these counterparty risks? And this is a problem that everybody faces. So the way that we're dealing with it, I'm very proud of the way we're dealing with it. Right? I think we have one of the most professional approaches out there. The infrastructure that we're putting in place around T+1 settlement is going to definitely mitigate this. We have very clear policies on our exchange about what percentage of our assets can be placed on any one exchange. So we're dealing with it, but it is definitely a struggle, and it's definitely going to affect us. Now, what I want to say, though, about the Liquid order book, if it affects us, it affects everybody else as well, okay? And you have a choice on which way you want to go. So some guys are going to be much more cavalier about this. They're not going to care, and it's going to look really good at the beginning until it goes wrong. So let me just state unequivocally that we are not those guys. We are definitely the guys who are going to be a little bit more risk adverse, cautious, because we're playing the long game. We want to be here for the long term. Okay. All right. So the other thing here, the changing liquidity provider landscape. Just a little bit about that. So to give you an example here, here in Japan, one of our major liquidity providers, CoinCheck, suddenly out of nowhere is hardly on the map at all. And this can happen at any time. So we've begun to build into our business plan and into our technology the idea, and even into our models, right down to our models, the idea that at any given point, anybody who's really important to us could suddenly disappear. So, that's essentially just what I'm saying is that we're very aware of the fact that the landscape is changing all the time, and we're taking that into account when we build our technology, when we set up our infrastructure agreements, our legal agreements, etc. And we're prepared to deal with that, okay? Final thing, nobody asked me this question, but how are we, dealing with the technical execution risk? It's funny because, we have a new hire. He maybe at some point he may do something public. I don't know if the announcement has gone out, but if it hasn't, I'm not gonna say his name here because maybe the new hire has already been announced. But I will say we've hired someone who I'm really happy about. Of course, I'm happy about all of our hires, but this guy has some really good, deep level knowledge around connectivity, low latency market making, low latency SOR technology, etc. A long-term veteran in this area. And this is one of the questions that he asked me, right? And so how do we deal with this? This is a really big point for us. And we've developed we're talking about what we did over the last few months. Well, a lot of what we did and a lot of what we're doing in this particular area around the SOR is dealing with all those edge cases that we're going to have to deal with. So to give you an example of a well-known one, maybe I'm not so worried about mentioning the name. I don't want to disparage these guys, but I think it's well known that Kraken has a lot of issues with their API. At the same time, they have some fairly good liquidity, right? So how do you deal with that with people like them? Well, you have to develop your technology around their edge cases and limit what you can do with them, right? So you don't want to do something like a simulated fill and kill because you're going to run into various issues, right? But you do have other ways to deal with them. So I will say that this has been a learning experience for us, and we've developed a huge amount of expertise that around developing and dealing with the execution risk for each of the different potential liquidity providers. So much so that one of the things we're going to do going forward, I talked about a little bit about T+1 settlement, etc., is to offer our services as an ECN. So for those of you who don't know what an ECN is, that's translates as an electronic communication network. That probably doesn't mean much to most people. I guess the way to think of this is that you can piggyback on the liquid infrastructure to execute on third-party exchanges. Okay, so we become an aggregator of third-party exchange. This is a little bit different from the World Book, but certainly, well, let me explain a little bit about how it's different from the liquid order book. So if you're an ECN, and you have the technical infrastructure piece, what we say is, look, we have a single unified API, and you may make use of that API to execute against all of these different exchanges. You don't need to figure out all the edge cases, but to do that, you do need to have your own accounts on each of these exchanges. You asked, I think a number of people asked about the usage of cash. This is one area where we believe cash will have significant utility, right? So we're definitely going to look for our clients of the ECN service to make use of that, okay? All right, so let me just go back here. Hopefully. All right, so any other questions? Let's see what we got. Oh, we got a whole bunch more. Okay, we're over time here, but since we've got a few questions, why not? Okay, so here's one. George asked, as partnerships with exchanges expand, can we use the same single wallet to follow all of our trades on these exchanges, hence avoiding the pain of moving funds and crypto around? So if you are maintaining all of your funds on in liquid accounts, then yes, this will be a possibility. Will you have a single unified wallet? Maybe not yet. There are technical issues around this wallet, depending on whether they're ECR tokens. There are a lot of issues. So I would say it's certainly the case that if you're maintaining all of your funds on liquid in liquid wallets, that may be the case, but in other cases, maybe not. So Kenny said no. Will we take legal action? I don't think that we can patent ideas, and I don't want to give you the feeling that I'm saying that Binance is just copying us. That's probably going too far, but it does seem suspicious. So no, we won't take any legal action. We have no intention of doing anything like that. Okay. Sorry if I gave you that impression. That's going a bit too far. Is any startup using your platform to start an ICO? Oh my God, is any? We're doing 3 to 4 a week, dude. Yes, most certainly. Do we plan to have cash as a smart contract? It is a very, very definite possibility. I don't want to say 100%, but yes. Okay. So, so it will go max $10 a cash. I don't know where you got that. Maybe you misinterpreted something. I don't think it will. It's limited to $10. Okay. Is the World Book patented? Well, the World Book concept itself is not patented at the moment. We've hired a significant number of people on our legal staff. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not a patent lawyer. I can't talk about patents competently. I will say that we are looking into what areas of our technology can be patented. So we'll see. Okay. I just got a ticket for Liquid. So somebody asking a question about which is a ticket. They're using this AMA to do that. So since they're using this AMA to do that, I want to mention something about Liquid and what we're doing with that. And I think this is very significant. We take customer service very seriously. I want to say that we did a great job on customer service, but I don't think we can legitimately say that. But what we have done is we've hired or ramped up our staff at our customer support center. So, of course, we've increased the number of people here in Japan. We've increased the number of people in Japan. But where we've seen a really dramatic increase, I was blown away by how many people. We've added a new customer support center in the Philippines. I think my understanding, I believe we now have 50 people, maybe 60 people staffed there. So we have dramatically increased our customer support. And what we have seen is open tickets plummet. So I think in a very short time, I don't want to promise a time frame because, again, this is not my area, but one of our staff, that the guy who's managing this, Jason, I had a discussion with him a few days ago. He told me about the decrease in the number of open tickets. I think it's very likely in the next few weeks that we will go down to a very small number of open tickets that will remain constant. So I think that if you're an existing CoinEx user or Cryptos user, or a future Liquid user, you are going to see a big improvement there. We've also, Seth has done a lot around deposits, automating the whole deposit procedure, and he's automating or looking into how we can automate the withdrawal procedure. Ray has done an amazing job. He gave us an explanation, him and Dominic, one of the other guys on our staff, about what they're doing about automating KYC and AML. And I got to tell you, I know I'm kind of bragging about our own company, but I'm very impressed with what we've done there. I think you're going to see a tremendous ramp up in our capacity to onboard new people, and that's going to lead to more active traders and more liquidity. Okay? All right. I'm going to give it just a little bit more. If not, okay, guys, I think, what are we? We're at an hour and 15 minutes. I hope I've answered a number of your questions. I hope I've left you excited about Liquid. I'm excited about Liquid. We have meetings every single day about Liquid. I have this touch point every day. I have design discussions. I'm seeing it all come together. It is so exciting, and I hope that you guys are going to be very impressed by what happens on April 6th. Now, it's a limited beta in just a few pairs, and even more excited with what happens when we roll out the full Liquid platform in late May. Okay? All right, guys. I think that's it. Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to sign off. Bye, guys.